and welcome to the 6th edition of the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Conclave. I'm Sumit Lakhotia. Now, this initiative seeks to promote consumer choices and freedom in spheres like tobacco harm reduction or THR, highlighting the need for progressive regulations based on science and consumer rights. Now, harm reduction assumes critical urgency against the backdrop of tobacco addiction reaching pandemic levels. Now, over 200 million people use smokeless tobacco like Henny and Gutka, 72 million smoke bidis and 28 million consume cigarettes. This addiction is estimated to cause about 1.3 million deaths annually in our country. The economic costs arising out of addiction-induced diseases are put at $27.5 billion. Harm reduction has emerged as a top priority for the government, as is evident in the recent inclusion of nicotine replacement therapy products, NRT, like chewing gums, patches, tablets, oral strips and lozenges to the national list of essential medicines. Could it be that there is a broader consensus among scientists, medical practitioners, regulators, and other key stakeholders on the need to draw a new consumer regulation framework to combat smoking harm and embrace global best practices? To throw more light on this subject and on the need to embrace innovations and global regulatory insights to save lives, I have in studio three experts. Allow me to introduce them. We have Dr. K. Madan Gopal. He's a senior consultant health at Niti Aayog. We have Mr. Upendra N. Sharma. He's a partner at JSA or J. Sagar Associates. It's a leading law firm that operates in over 7 cities. And we have Dr. Kiran Melkote. He's an eminent orthopedic surgeon and member of the Association for Harm Reduction, Education and Research. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me here today. Dr. Melkote, I'll start off with you. So, while banning e-cigarettes about 3 years ago via the Prohibition of Electronic Cigarettes Act 2019, the government argued that, and I'll quote, that these products are usually marketed as being safer alternatives for conventional cigarettes, but such notions of safety are false, unquote. The government also held that, quote, these products may act as gateway products to induce non-smokers, especially youth and adolescents, to nicotine use leading to addiction, unquote. Dr. Melkote, how do you view these premises? What are your thoughts?
Well, actually, going back to the time when this act was brought in, so if I actually go back, if I was able to recall correctly, all these statements were made not by our health minister, but they were made by our finance minister. The other thing is, at that time, it was more of a fear. It was that these are newer products and they may have some risks that we don't know about. But even then, and in the time since, we've added to the evidence. There is now a global consensus that these are quite safer than cigarettes. If you look at the UK, for example, it's part of the NHS. So now, UK will become the first country in the world to start prescribing patients vaping devices through the NHS.
Right.
So they have sort of gone in the other direction that India has. They have embraced tobacco harm reduction as a major way to reduce the burden of tobacco on all their citizens. And wherever it has been legalized, wherever it has been embraced, for example, if you look at Japan, if you look at UK, if you look at New Zealand, the youth rates have actually plummeted. Youth smoking rates have actually plummeted. So all these fears about it being a gateway product, it's not really borne out in the real world.
Okay, I see. So, you started off by talking about some of the research, and also I will come to you on that. That is another important topic that I want to talk to you. But moving to the other side, Mr. Sharma, I'll come to you first. Just your thoughts. The legislation, of course, plays a very important role in guiding society, in guiding the way we lead our lives. So your thoughts on how this is helping, make safer alternatives available to our consumers and, saving lives from harm substances?
Sure. You see, safer alternatives usually come from innovative technologies, new upgrades in the technology. And then these are very difficult for any regulator to handle. Right. You see, what can the regulator do in such circumstances? Either have some knee-jerk reaction or some policy-driven reaction. Because you see, first time a new technology comes, it changes the status quo. It promises a great potential for the future. At the same time, hidden discrepancies or defaults that may follow. So the regulator can either have a consultative process, evaluate the technology, and make some stakeholders' thoughts on this, and then come up with a solution, or have a knee-jerk reaction to ban it. And that's the thing, that's, going by the various, how the internationally on the e-cigarettes, various of these foreign countries, like the UK, the Canada, they had well-established medical systems, but one of the reasons was sheer, colossal of health issues because of regular tobacco smoking, that they went into the safer options. Right. So safer options are always a good choice, and the government should look into that.
Okay, very important point there, Mr. Sharma, thank you for that. Dr. Gopal, coming to you now, what kind of consumer regulation framework we should have that can promote the objective of saving lives from harm substances? What's your thoughts, sir?
Medicinal use of tobacco was a little documented, but the use of this is very complex. So many interventions have started. In 70s, it was a banning on this cigarette smoking is injurious to health. That was started like that. Then one of the very good thing, which my lawyer friend will also agree, that in 70s the judicial system has started the PIL. As a result, a lot of judicial activism happened.
Yes.
And the civil societies and the judicial activism has resulted in having a legal framework for curtailing, controlling this tobacco thing.
That's very important.
So, many activities are happening in the country, and you have seen that after we have banned the tobacco in public places, now you don't see people smoking in the public places.
Yes,
that kind of effect is there because of regulation.
That also leads to a kind of a slow and steady change in the behavior also.
Somewhere that the people who are addicted to this tobacco, at least some option is made available to them.
Dr. Melkote, over the last 3 to 5 years, what are some developments, new research that has come in that you can share with us that can guide the viewers on the current scenario that we're talking about?
So there's we have a very well-respected organization called the Cochrane Collaboration. So what they do is they actually look at various papers dealing with the same subject done by various researchers across the world. So they take all these studies together and they do a review of reviews.
Okay.
So in terms of when you actually ascribe what kind of importance to each paper, this is actually called as a meta-analysis. So this is the most this is actually the highest level of evidence there can be. So the latest review from them, it actually squarely goes in favor of e-cigarettes and vaping.
Okay.
So what they do say is, when you actually see all these studies which compare vaping to any other kind of NRT, for example, lozenges or patches or anything like that, it is actually more than 3 times likely to help somebody quit. And when you actually compare it with non-nicotine vapes, then it is moderate certainty. So they have strong evidence that it helps when compared to the traditional NRTs, and they have moderate certainty with non-nicotine vapes. So this is one of the most important papers. And there's one more well-respected body called as the SRNT. So they are the ones who study about all the effects of nicotine across the world. So 15 of the past presidents of the SRNT, they came together and they released a policy statement because they were worried about the direction that the WHO is headed. For reasons best known to them, major global bodies like WHO are totally opposed to the concept of tobacco harm reduction. Let's just take a step back and examine what is this tobacco harm reduction.
Sure.
The whole concept is nicotine is not the villain. Nicotine doesn't kill you. Nicotine hooks you. It's the rest of the stuff in tobacco that kills you, especially when you burn tobacco. So if you are able to separate nicotine from tobacco, and if you're able to deliver it to the people who are already hooked on nicotine, so then you avoid the risks, or you at least minimize them to a level which is manageable.
Okay.
They may not die.
You know, you've been tracking the progress made in the sphere of the tobacco harm reduction over the years. What do you feel about our achievements, and given that the national mission is to save lives from harm substances, just your thoughts on the progress, if you could.
Right. So unfortunately, we have a rate of quitting of about 0.5% annually in our country. So out of the 267 million people who are dependent on tobacco, like you already said, 200 million on smokeless tobacco.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, all our so-called policies focus on 4% of these, which is just the cigarette smokers. BD smokers, they are larger chunk of combustible tobacco, but they hardly pay any taxes. The BD industry is not regulated. Now they're not even required to show warnings. So if we are really serious, why aren't we going after the major problem? 200 million smokeless tobacco. Nobody talks about them.
Yeah.
So in our country, the smaller proportion is the one that is taxed most heavily. They actually bear the brunt of almost every rules and regulations. Like Sir was mentioning about COTPA.
Yeah.
COTPA focuses mainly on cigarettes. It has, I mean, if you just look at the name, cigarettes is the first word in that.
Yeah.
Why are we focusing on cigarettes when we have a larger problem with zarda, ghutka, khani, etc.?
Okay. Well, we're going in for a quick break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side, we'll be coming back to our eminent panel and we'll examine the threats posed by the illegal cigarettes market. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Conclave. We're in discussion with a panel of experts and our conversation continues. Now, adopting best practices and innovation, that's what we're going to focus on. But before we continue with our discussions on the need to embrace innovations and global regulatory insights, let's watch this short package on the issue of flourishing e-cigarettes market despite its ban.
One of the adverse consequences of bans is often the emergence of an unregulated illegal market. Experts point out that the passage of the Prohibition of E-Cigarettes Act 2019 has created a black market across metros as well as Tier 1 and Tier 2 towns, with these devices being made available without any regulatory check. Presently, 3 years after the ban, media reports point to a flourishing grey market for e-cigarettes despite routine seizures at street stalls and pawn shops in metros. Market observers note that cheap Chinese imports have taken over the grey market, raising serious health risks to consumers.
Well, now continuing on, Dr. Gopal, I'll come to you first. So, what your thoughts on some of the progressive consumer laws that are required that can help, building capacities in the country? What I mean is in terms of, training large number of nurses and doctors that can enhance compliance and quality standards, because that is also really required in the country to help in this tobacco harm reduction.
As you know that we are having frontline workers in the form of health workers, male and female, who caters to a population of 3,000 to 5,000 depending on the terrain and the difficulties. To assist them, they are the community health volunteers, the ASHA workers. We are trying to see that how we would be roping in for promoting the stopping or cessation of tobacco, so that as early as possible the people are desisted from using tobacco products. Second thing, you have rightly mentioned that we do have many laws. We require regulatory capacities. How to build regulatory capacity, that's a work in progress. It's the public awareness which would be the cutting edge in enforcing any laws. The estimate in the 21st century is 1 billion premature deaths. We have to focus on that. It's not death due to tobacco. It's the prematurity of the deaths. We have to focus on that.
Absolutely. It's a very important point that you raised there, Dr. Gopal, because it's the premature death. It's the years of life, years of not just work life, but years of personal life also that has been lost because of this. Mr. Sharma, earlier in your first answer, you also spoke about innovations. Now, that is really important. Your thoughts on what can be done, maybe some incentives that can be provided to large corporates, to even startups. We're seeing startups blossom and coming up with such great solutions to unexpected problems, unknown problems at times also. Just your thoughts on that, what's happening in that space?
So you see, there is lack of any incentives from the government on this, because you see, if you were to really promote it, have tax incentives, as it is, just by banning a product, the grey market is still thriving.
Yes.
The products are available to, all and sundry without any regulations, without any quality checks, and even the minors are getting it. So that is also losing the government government the revenue. So having said that, if it's properly framed, and another thing is that, the ban does not prohibit you from kind of doing analysis or doing research, etc. So if a proper research is done and that's brought up and the corporates are encouraged to do that, then, and there is some tax incentive, especially for the startups, then it will certainly help the masses.
There are actually 2 or 3 things here I want to address. Regarding the research, we have tried. There's a de facto ban on research on e-cigarettes in India. So that is number one. So all the data, all the studies are from the West or are from the other countries in our neighborhood. They are okay with it. So if you actually look at our neighbor Pakistan, they are light years ahead on this. They have embraced harm reduction.
Wow.
So you also have the newer kind of snus. You also have the newer kind of nicotine pouches available there. And recent entrant was the Philippines. So there they have made the distinction between vaping and smoking. They have separate vaping areas where nobody can smoke. You can only vape. There were many short films done about this. One of my good friends, Mr. Aman Mahajan, has made a documentary about how it has been unsuccessful on the ground. And more importantly, see, when we are not giving them viable alternatives, newer technologies are already here to stay. If you look at the West, this is already there. It is already in vogue. You can't actually take it away. So I think the best thing that we can do is start adding it to our National Tobacco Control Program and start regulating it. Vaping substitutes for smoking. It's not a gateway. So dual use is usually in the starting. When somebody starts vaping, they might use both for a while. But as sort of time goes by, they usually switch exclusively to vaping. It doesn't happen the other way around. It has happened the other way around only in India when we banned it. Many of the people who used to vape had no choice but to go back to.
Just to add to that, if you see the regulations in the UK, the EU, the Canada, they actually regulate very properly, and they provide what is the strength, that is allowed, who is it allowed to, and how do you package and label. So all these regulations really help in that. Manufacturers, the companies have to regularly report to the government that, what is the impact on the masses. The studies have to be done, which are then analyzed by the government.
Dr. Gopal, while you want to add to that, but just while you're adding to that, I just wanted you to also just touch upon this. At the start of this segment, we saw that this package about the proliferation of cigarettes in the e-cigarettes in the grey market. Just your thoughts on what explains this proliferation, what's happening here with the metros and even the smaller towns. So first your comment, and then...
So basically it is about awareness only. If something is banned, something is not good, why we should be going and buying it? Vaping, another thing, the expert committee has said no, because even if we, in our country, if one mechanism is created that this is to be regulated, you will find a different regulatory kind of things. So it's very difficult, because given the regulatory capacities and other things, it's an awareness kind, and if a ban is there, it has to be complete ban.
Absolutely.
Because in the public interest, in the public from the public health point of view, it has to be done. Had we have a Public Health Act, this calls for having a Public Health Act, which the work is in progress in that direction. In Public Health Act, if something is affecting the human health, then obviously everything would be enforced.
Yet we have cigarettes available freely and legally for everybody. That is the problem, sir. It's not about...
No, very valid point. We definitely...
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when the vaccine was not available, people used to go to other countries for getting vaccination.
So you see, it's India's case that, vaping is harmless, but there is evidence that it's 90% less harmful. And if you have cigarettes, as doctors mentioned, and BDs and other stuff available, and the consumer should be given a choice of lesser harmful options,
No, great. So we'll continue this conversation, but it's time for a very short break, and because we'll head into our third segments, in which we'll be listening to some consumer voices and discussing the way forward. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back to the 6th edition of the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Conclave. Now I'm going to go over to my panel and ask them to share their insights and perspectives based on their interactions with consumers. You know, what do they get to hear when they talk to consumers, when they are having conversations with them, talking to them about the awareness levels, about the options available for harm reduction and safer options. So starting with Dr. Melkote, I'll start with you and then go down the panel.
Basically what's happened is, because of our long-running sort of campaign for public health, we have managed to conflate nicotine and tobacco. They're not the same. There's a need for delinking tobacco from nicotine. But because if you actually go in that context, I've spoken to many of my doctors. Not everybody understands that they are different. Many of our doctors believe that nicotine is carcinogenic, which is false, which is, you know. Okay. So that is where it starts from, and it's almost given knowledge right now. Many you actually see many of newspaper articles mentioning court judgments where even the learned judges say that it is actually carcinogenic. We all know that it is a sort of a wild poison, but they themselves overlook that you have nicotine pouches and patches freely available in the market. You have lozenges available in the market. When I also spoke to many of my friends who used to smoke a lot, then they switched to vaping. So the first thing that they would say that, is this really safe? Because it's so easy to quit with these. But once the ban occurred, they had to go back to cigarettes.
Right.
And then you had many sort of statements released by global bodies like WHO and etc. So now there's a lot of misinformation around, and many people believe that they are as harmful as cigarettes. Some people believe they are more harmful than cigarettes.
Okay. So this awareness creation
that is the problem.
Really
yes,
important.
Yes.
Dr. Gopal, your thoughts?
When this ban was enforced, and when we were talking about the benefits of that, it requires a lot of awareness, lot of patience, and lot of persuasion. That means this is harmful.
Mr. Sharma.
So you see, the youngsters that I deal with, I interact with, they all say when these are, lesser harmful options available, why are they banned? You know, that's the general phenomenon. That when this option is available, internationally accepted, then why is the government limiting our choice?
Very important point. But let's go over, and in fact, I'd like to invite the panel also to listen to some of the consumer voices. Let's listen in.
Well, I've been smoking for about 7-8 years now. It started as a joke with friends in college and hostel, and then now it's just a part of my everyday life.
So it all started 20 years back. After I did my schooling, when I entered college.
So I started smoking when I started my cafe, and I was going through a bad phase.
Initially it was for socializing.
So I have been smoking for around 10 years plus.
So I've been smoking since around 10 years now.
Yes. Who doesn't want to quit smoking?
Of course, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely I would want to. Absolutely want to quit. And it's very tough to let go because the withdrawal symptoms they are real, for sure.
Maybe something about nicotine, yeah, something.
And getting off addiction is not that easy.
Yes, very much. In fact, I had quit smoking for 1 year.
I'm trying to quit, but it's difficult since I get that nicotine craving.
Yes, it is difficult, definitely, but I'm trying hard to quit.
Yes, I have tried few of them, and I think alternatives can help any smoker to quit smoking. But these alternatives are not openly available to us.
Access is an always issue because they are not legal in the market, and having more options are always better.
Yes, alternatives should be available, and obviously everyone should look at alternatives if they need to quit smoking. And but not very easy to get your hands on them.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard some consumers, you've heard from the experts. It's been a very interesting, thought-provoking discussion. I'd like to thank Mr. Sharma, Dr. Gopal and Dr. Melkote for taking out time for being a part of the 6th edition of the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Conclave. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching.